Welcome to Auction version 4, the latest event management software tool from Auction Systems. In this video in the data entry series, I will explain how to enter expenses. To get to the data entry area on the main Home Task ribbon, click Data Entry. Some organizations like to track expenses incurred by the organization or incurred by volunteers or donors, so they have a clear idea of how much an event costs. While expenses associated with an item can be entered in the data entry form for the item, and expenses submitted by a volunteer can be entered in the name entry form for that volunteer, all of those types of expenses, as well as expenses such as catering or decorations that are attributed to the event rather than a specific person or item, can be efficiently entered in the data entry for expenses. To enter expenses in the project, in the ribbon of data entry types, click Expenses. This is the expense data entry screen. On the left is a list of the expenses already entered in the project, including the description of the expense and the amount of the expense. To add a new expense, click the plus button along the top ribbon and choose Expense. This is the Add New Expense screen, and the description panel is open. First, type in a description such as catering deposit or final catering bill, or if a portion of the sale price of an auction item must be paid back to the donor as a consignment, then the description could be consignment fee. Enter the amount of the expense and the date the expense was incurred. Then choose the appropriate expense action. If there's not an action needed, you're just tracking the expense, but no one needs to be reimbursed, choose No Action Needed. If this is an expense associated with a vendor and the vendor must be paid, click Pay Vendor. When you click Pay Vendor, the vendor panel below will open and you can choose the vendor if that vendor is already entered in the project, most likely as a donor, even if they're not actually donating their services. If they are not in the list of company names, you will click the plus button in the vendor panel to add a new company or household name to the data. Be sure to also enter the payment itself as a reimbursement in the purchases and payments of that new donor. Maybe someone on the decorations committee purchased flowers for the centerpieces and wants to be reimbursed. In this case, choose Reimburse Volunteer. When you do that, the lower panel will open. It's the Submitter panel, and you will be able to pick the volunteer from the list of name records in your project, or you can add a new volunteer name. Once you pick the volunteer name and save the expense, the Payments panel in the submitter's name entry form will indicate that they have a credit balance in the amount of the expense. If they're attending the event and may purchase something, that credit could be applied to offset their balance due at the end of the night. Or, if you actually reimburse the volunteer with cash or a check for this expense, be sure to enter the reimbursement in their Payments panel or Data Entry Purchases and Payments so that they will no longer have a credit balance going into the event. This payment will show up as an organization payment in the Payments panel of the volunteers being reimbursed. Lastly, you can associate the expense with a cash or in-kind gift. Let's say that that same volunteer does not want to be reimbursed for the flowers, but rather wishes to donate the flowers as an in-kind gift. So you enter the cost of the flowers as an in-kind gift from the volunteer. You may still want to enter the expense because you'd like to have a clear and accurate list of the true cost, i.e., all the expenses associated with the event for budgeting purposes for the future. The next year you may not be so lucky as to have flowers donated, so you want to track how much they cost this year so you know how much to budget for next year. Click the Associate with Cash in-kind gift, and from the pull-down, choose the in-kind gift. If it's not in the list, use the plus sign to add the in-kind gift to that volunteer's record. And of course, also be sure to pick that same volunteer for the submitter of the expense. Since the expense offsets the donation, the expense will not show up as a cash credit in the submitter's name record, and no payment will need to be made to them by your organization. Lastly, you can pick a different account or a sub-account to apply the expense to, or add new if necessary. Be sure to save the expense by clicking the Save or Save and Add button along the ribbon. Thank you for joining us.